Today, I'm going to tell you a magical story about Jack and his incredible adventure up the beanstalk. Are you ready? Let's go! Once upon a time, there was a boy named Jack. He lived with his mom in a little house. They were very poor and only had one cow. One day, Jack's mom told him to sell the cow at the market. So Jack took the cow and went on his way. On his way to the market, Jack met a strange man. This man offered Jack some magical beans in exchange for the cow. Jack thought it was a great deal and traded the cow for the beans. When he got home, his mom was very upset. She threw the beans out the window and sent Jack to bed without dinner. The next morning, Jack woke up to a surprising sight. A gigantic beanstalk had grown overnight, reaching all the way up to the sky. The beanstalk was thick and sturdy. With leaves as big as umbrellas, Jack was curious, so he decided to climb the beanstalk. He climbed higher and higher, passing through clouds and feeling the cool breeze until he reached the top. At the top of the beanstalk, Jack found a huge castle. The castle was made of gleaming white stone, with tall towers that seemed to touch the sky. The castle was home to a giant and his wife. The giant was enormous, with a booming voice and footsteps that shook the ground. Jack sneaked inside and saw piles of gold coins, glittering in the dim light of the castle's grand hall. He quickly grabbed a handful and ran back down the beanstalk. The next day, Jack climbed up the beanstalk again. This time, he found a magical hen that laid golden eggs. The hen's feathers shimmered with a golden hue, and each egg it laid was pure gold. Jack took the hen and climbed back down to show his mom. She was very happy, and they had plenty of food to eat. But Jack wasn't done yet. He climbed the beanstalk one more time. This time, he found a magical harp that played beautiful music. The harp was intricately carved with golden strings that produced the sweetest melodies. As Jack was taking the harp, it started playing and woke up the giant. The giant chased Jack, but Jack was quick. He climbed down the beanstalk as fast as he could. When he reached the bottom, Jack grabbed an axe and chopped down the beanstalk. The giant fell and was never seen again. Jack and his mom lived happily ever after with their new treasures. And that's the story of Jack and the Beanstalk.
Once upon a time, in a small village nestled at the edge of a great forest, there lived a sweet young girl known as Little Red Riding Hood. She was called this because of a beautiful red cloak her grandmother had made for her, which she wore everywhere. One sunny morning, Little Red Riding Hood's mother asked her to deliver a basket of food to her grandmother, who lived deep in the forest. "Remember, my dear," her mother warned her, "stay on the path and don't talk to strangers." "Don't worry, mother, I will be careful," she said. As she walked through the woods, the trees whispered and the air smelled fresh and earthy. But soon, something unexpected happened. From behind the trees, a sly wolf appeared. He was hungry, and he had a wicked plan. "Good morning, little girl. Where are you off to in such a fine day?" said the wolf. Little Red Riding Hood remembered her mother's words, but was polite. She smiled and replied, "I'm going to visit my grandmother, who lives in a cottage at the end of the path." "How kind! But perhaps you could pick some flowers for her along the way," said the wolf. The wolf had a sneaky idea. While Little Red Riding Hood picked flowers, he dashed off to the grandmother's house, planning to get there first. The wolf knocked on the door of the grandmother's cottage, and when the old woman opened it, he pounced. He locked her away and took her place, dressing in her clothes. The wolf climbed into the grandmother's bed, hiding under the covers, waiting for Little Red Riding Hood to arrive. When Little Red Riding Hood arrived at her grandmother's house, she noticed something wasn't quite right. "Grandmother, what big eyes you have," said Little Red Riding Hood. The wolf replied, "All the better to see you with, my dear." "Grandmother, what big ears you have," says Little Red Riding Hood. "All the better to hear you with, my dear," the wolf replied, grinning. Little Red Riding Hood was even more concerned and said, "Grandmother, what big teeth you have." The wolf replied, "All the better to eat you with, my dear." In a flash, the wolf leapt from the bed, but just as he was about to pounce on the Little Red Riding Hood, a brave woodcutter who had been passing by heard the scream. With one mighty swing, the woodcutter chased the wolf away, saving Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother. Grateful and relieved, Little Red Riding Hood hugged the grandmother. They promised to always be careful in the woods from that day forward. "Thank you, Mr. Woodcutter. I've learned to always listen to my mother's advice," said Little Red Riding Hood. And so Little Red Riding Hood learned a valuable lesson that day, to stay on the path and to never trust strangers. Always listen to those who care for her. And they lived happily ever after. The end. Once upon a time, in a sunny forest, there lived a very speedy hare and a very slow tortoise. The hare, of course, was always bragging about how fast he was. "Look at me," said the hare. "I'm the fastest animal in the whole forest. No one can keep up with me." The tortoise looks up slowly and responds calmly, "I may not be fast, but I am steady. I bet I could win a race against you." The hare laughed at the idea. "You beat me in a race? Impossible," he said. The hare said, "You are so slow. Fine, I'll race you, but don't expect to win." And so the race was set. The animals of the forest gathered to watch. The race would take them from the edge of the forest to the big oak tree and back. And they're off. The hare, smiling, talking to himself, says, "This is too easy. I'll take a little break." The hare, confident that he would win, decided to rest for a while. After all, he had plenty of time. But the tortoise didn't stop. He kept going step by step without rushing. Time passed, and the hare continued to nap, unaware that the tortoise was getting closer and closer to the finish line. Finally, the tortoise reached the finish line, just as the hare woke up from his nap. "No, I can't believe it," said the hare. And so the tortoise won the race. The hare learned an important lesson that day. It's not always the fastest who wins, but the one who keeps going no matter what. Slow and steady wins the race. Once upon a time, in a meadow, there lived two creatures, an ant who was smart and hard-working, and a grasshopper who was carefree and playful. As the summer days passed on, the two spent their time very differently. The ant worked tirelessly, getting food and storing it away, preparing for the coming winter. He was determined to prepare for the months ahead, because once winter arrived, the cold temperature would make it very hard to find food. The grasshopper laughed at the ant. "Ha ha! Why are you working so hard, little ant? The sun is shining, the weather is perfect. Come join me. There's music to be made, fun to be had. Let's play games. Let's enjoy the day." The ant, in a very polite but serious voice, said, "I must work, dear grasshopper. Winter is coming, and there will be no food. And I need to be prepared. You should think about the future too, while the days are still warm and there is still food to collect and store." "Oh, don't worry," said the grasshopper in a playful voice. "Winter is far away. I'll be fine. Come on, let's enjoy the sunshine. Why waste time working when we can have fun? You work too much." As the days grew colder and colder and the leaves fell from the trees, winter arrived, and the grasshopper found himself without food or shelter, desperate. He remembered that the ant worked hard and stored food prepared for this occasion, so he went to go ask for help. The grasshopper said, "I am very cold. Please be kind to me, ant. I've got nothing to eat. Can you spare me some food to get me through the winter and a place to escape the cold weather?" The ant, calm but with a firm voice, said, "I worked hard all summer while you were playing. I was gathering food for the winter, preparing. You spent your time playing instead of preparing. I have enough food for myself, but I cannot spare much for you. I'll give you the little bit that I can afford to give you." The grasshopper realized his mistake. He had been so focused on enjoying the present that he had forgotten to prepare for the future. Now he would have to face the consequences. The story of the ant and the grasshopper teaches us that it is important to enjoy the present, but you must also remember to work hard and prepare for the future. So remember to find a balance between your fun and your responsibilities. Hard work today can bring you rewards tomorrow. The end. Once upon a time, in a kingdom far, far away, there was a beautiful queen who had a magical mirror. She would ask it every day, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" And every time the mirror would reply, "You, my queen, are the fairest of them all." But one day, the mirror gave a different answer and told the queen that Snow White, her stepdaughter, was now the fairest of them all, the most beautiful. Filled with jealousy and anger, the queen decided that she must do something about it. Snow White was a kind and gentle young princess. She had grown up under the care of the wicked queen. But as the queen grew more jealous and envious, even more and more every day, she ordered a huntsman to take Snow White deep into the forest and, well, to get rid of her. However, the huntsman could not bring himself to hurt Snow White. Instead, he let her go, and Snow White ran deep into the forest, finding refuge in a small home owned by 7 dwarfs. In this small home, Snow White met the dwarfs. They welcomed her in with open arms, and Snow White made a home with them, taking care of their little home while they worked in the mines. Back at the castle, the queen soon discovered that Snow White was still alive. She was furious. She used her dark magic to disguise herself as an older woman. She created a poisonous comb. She knew that if she were to comb Snow White's hair, the comb would cause her to fall asleep eternally, forever. The wicked queen traveled to the small home of the 7 dwarfs, and when she saw Snow White, she praised her beautiful hair. And she then quickly pulled out the poisonous comb and combed Snow White's hair. The poison from the comb took effect immediately and caused Snow White to fall immediately into deep, unbreakable sleep. The news of Snow White's slumber spread across the kingdom, and a prince who had once fallen in love with her came to her side. He kissed her, breaking the spell and awakening her from her eternal sleep. Everybody was happy. The 7 dwarfs celebrated her return, with Snow White alive and well. The evil queen was punished for her wickedness, and from that moment on, Snow White and the prince lived happily ever after, ruling the kingdom with kindness and love. And that's the classic story of Snow White, a tale of jealousy, kindness, and the power of true love. The moral of the story is that True beauty comes from within, and kindness will always triumph over jealousy and wickedness. The tale teaches us that the inner goodness and compassion are what truly makes someone beautiful, and that while negative traits like envy can cause harm, love and kindness ultimately lead to happiness and justice. The end. Once upon a time, in a faraway kingdom, there lived an emperor who loved his clothes more than anything in the world. He would spend every coin he had on robes, coats, and fancy shoes. Not on soldiers, not on feast, but on fashion. He had a new outfit for every hour of the day. And instead of talking about the kingdom's affairs, people would whisper, "The emperor! Oh, he's in the dressing room." One day, two swindlers came down to town. They claimed to be master weavers with a very special gift. "We weave the finest clothes in the world," they said. So fine, in fact, that they're invisible to anybody who is foolish or dumb or unfit for their job. The emperor was thrilled and excited to hear about this. What a marvelous way to discover who's clever and who is a fool, he thought. He paid the weavers a large amount of gold and told them to start at once. Day after day, the weavers pretended to weave, but the looms stayed empty. Of course, there was nothing there at all. Curious, the emperor sent his most trusted minister to check on the clothes, but the poor man couldn't see anything. The minister was thinking, "Am I a fool? Am I unfit for my job?" So he smiled and said to the emperor, "Magnificent, absolutely stunning work." The emperor went to see for himself, and of course, there was nothing there. The workers were claiming that the material was invisible to anybody who was a fool. So the emperor, when he went down there, he saw nothing. But not wanting to appear unfit or like a fool, he joined the chorus and said, "Exquisite! What colors, what pattern," he declared. At last, the weavers finished the clothes and dressed the emperor for a grand parade. Though he wore nothing at all, everybody praised his new outfit. The emperor strutted proudly through the city. The crowd cheered and yelled in excitement because none of them wanted to look like they were fools. A small child shouting said, "But he's not wearing anything at all." The crowd gasped for air, murmured, silence started, and then everybody started laughing. The truth echoed throughout the whole town, and the sound of the crowd sounded like thunder. The emperor blushed, realizing the child was right. The emperor was very embarrassed, but he held his head high and walked on, because the parade must go on. And so the emperor learned a very important lesson. Even the finest of threads can't cover the truth. Had the emperor been honest, and also the people of the town, that there was really nothing they could see, then they would have been speaking the truth and not pretended to be wise or to see imaginary clothes, but they lied out of fear of not being in agreement with everybody else. The end. Once upon a time, in a quiet farmyard, a mother duck sat patiently on her nest, waiting for her eggs to hatch. When the eggs finally hatched, out came 6 tiny, fluffy ducklings, all yellow and cute, except for one. This one was much larger and clumsier than the rest. was different. He had dull gray feathers and looked nothing like the others. The other ducklings laughed at him. They called him the ugly duckling and did not want to play with him because of his looks. His mother, though kind, didn't know how to help him. Feeling lonely and heartbroken, the ugly duckling left the farmyard, hoping to find somewhere he would belong. He went through the forest and the fields, and he wandered. Every time he tried to fit in with different animals, he was rejected by the other animals, who only saw his differences. Winter came, and the ugly duckling grew even more miserable. He wished he could find a place where he would finally feel at home. One spring day, the ugly duckling came across a pond. He saw beautiful swans gliding across the water, and something inside him stirred. As he gazed into the water, he saw something surprising, astonishing. He wasn't an ugly duckling at all. In fact, he saw that he wasn't a duck. He was a graceful swan. Realizing his true beauty, the swan flew joyfully across the waters, finally feeling at home with his own kind. He ran into his brothers and sisters, the ducklings that were born with him, and they were impressed at the beauty of who they called the ugly duckling. From that day on, the swan was no longer ridiculed, but admired and loved for his elegance. He had finally found a place in the world. And so the ugly duckling's journey taught us all an important lesson. Beauty isn't always what it seems at first. The end.